My mother looked me in the eye and said, "We will not waste $120,000 on your sick daughter. That money is for Adrian's wedding." In that moment, my world collapsed. My little Lily's life was hanging by a thread, and the woman who raised me chose chandeliers and champagne over her granddaughter's heartbeat. I begged on my knees, but my mother turned her back, her heels clicking on the marble floor like the sound of a coffin closing. I thought nothing could hurt more than that. I was wrong. The humiliation at Adrian's wedding cut deeper than any knife. I grew up believing that love was measured in sacrifice. My father died when I was 11, leaving my mother adrift and bitter. 2 years later, she remarried, and with that came a new life, a new home, and eventually a new child who would eclipse me in every possible way. From the moment Adrian was born, my mother treated him like a rare jewel. I, Rachel Morgan, became the shadow that kept the house running, the one who was expected to bend, to give, to disappear so that he could shine. When I was 17, a letter arrived that should have changed my life. A full scholarship to a university across the country, 4 years of freedom, of possibility, of a future I had barely allowed myself to dream about. I remember clutching that envelope against my chest, my heart pounding with hope. But when I showed it to my mother, she didn't congratulate me. She didn't hug me. She just said, "You can't leave. Adrian needs you." At the time, he was barely 3 years old, a boy with soft curls and wide eyes, and I believed her. I tore the letter up that night. The next morning, I went to a diner and applied for a job washing dishes. From then on, my life became a steady rhythm of sacrifice. Every paycheck went toward Adrian's school fees, his music lessons, his summer camps. My friends went off to college, traveled abroad, posted pictures of their adventures. I stayed behind, folding laundry, paying bills, carrying groceries through the rain while my mother looked at me with something like mild tolerance rather than gratitude. I thought, foolishly, that my devotion would someday be recognized, that they would see me not as a servant, but as family. Adrian grew, and with each passing year, so did his sense of entitlement. By the time he was in high school, he had learned that his whims mattered more than my needs. He would throw tantrums when he didn't get the newest phone or when I suggested he take a part-time job. "Why should I?" he sneered once. "You're the one who works. That's your role." I laughed nervously then, telling myself he was just a kid. But the truth was clear. My mother had raised him to believe the world revolved around him, and I was just another planet in his orbit. When I became pregnant with Lily at 28, my mother's disappointment was palpable. "You've ruined your life," she spat, as if my daughter was a burden rather than a blessing. I raised Lily alone, juggling teaching by day and tutoring at night, yet I loved her with a fierceness that frightened me. She was the only thing in my life that felt truly mine. But even as a single mother, I still sent money home whenever Adrian needed something: tuition, books, rent when he moved to the city. It didn't matter how hard I struggled. His comfort was always the priority in my mother's eyes. Then Adrian met Vivian Clark. She was beautiful, with glossy hair and a laugh that sounded like champagne bubbles. Her family was wealthy, powerful, and, to my mother, the ultimate ticket to respectability. Overnight, Adrian transformed from a pampered son into the family's golden hope. He wore designer suits, posted pictures from luxury vacations, and introduced Vivian as if she were royalty. My mother beamed with pride, parading him around like a trophy. I became something else entirely. At family dinners, I was seated at the end of the table, my voice drowned out by their laughter. When I spoke, Adrian rolled his eyes. "God, Rachel, you sound so bitter. Can't you just be happy for me?" My mother joined in, her tone sharp and cutting. "He's achieving what you never could. Don't poison it with your jealousy." The words hit harder than any slap. I wasn't jealous. I was invisible. The final blow came when Lily fell ill. She was 6, pale and fragile, her tiny body racked with fatigue. Doctors said her heart condition required immediate surgery. $120,000 to save her life. I went to my mother, my hands trembling, my voice cracking. "Please, I'll pay you back. I just need help. She's your granddaughter." My mother's eyes were cold. "We cannot jeopardize Adrian's future. His wedding is next year. People are expecting it to be perfect." That was the moment I realized love in my family had always been conditional. Conditional on status, on appearance, on wealth. And I had none of those things. I left that house with Lily's hand in mine, a hollow ache in my chest, wondering how many pieces of myself I could lose before there was nothing left. Adrian thrived in my absence. With Vivian at his side, he became untouchable, the crown jewel of the Morgan name. The wedding announcements filled the local papers, describing the event as the social highlight of the season. They spoke of crystal chandeliers, imported flowers, and a ballroom dripping with luxury. Not one word mentioned the sister who had raised him. Not one word acknowledged the niece who was fighting for her life. And yet, when the invitation arrived, my name was on it. Not as family, not as a sister, but as an afterthought, tucked at the bottom with a note. 1 seat reserved. 1 seat, no mention of Lily, as if my daughter didn't exist. I stared at the card, my pulse hammering in my ears. All those years of sacrifice, all those sleepless nights, and this was the recognition I earned. I whispered to myself, I thought sacrifice would bring love. Instead, it made me invisible. And then a darker thought followed, sharp and unforgiving. If they couldn't see me as family, perhaps it was time they learned to see me as something else entirely. The first signs were subtle. Lily tiring too quickly on the playground, her face paling after only a few minutes of running. At first, I told myself she was just fragile, a little girl who needed rest. But the day she collapsed in my classroom, clutching her chest, everything changed. The hospital tests revealed the truth. Lily had a rare heart condition. The doctor's words sliced through me like a knife. Surgery was urgent and the cost was staggering, $120,000. I sat in the sterile office, staring at the number scrawled on a piece of paper, my mind spinning. As a teacher, I barely scraped by. Tutoring sessions and night classes brought in a little extra, but nothing close to this. Still, I had hope. Family is supposed to be there when the impossible arrives. Family is supposed to protect its own. That night, I went to my mother's house. I sat at her kitchen table, the same one where I had spent countless nights helping Adrian with his homework while she praised him for achievements I had financed. My hands shook as I spoke. "Mom, Lily needs surgery. Please, I can't do this alone. She's your granddaughter. If we pool together, we can save her." Her expression was cool, almost clinical. "Rachel, you have to be realistic. That kind of money, we can't risk it. Adrian's wedding is coming, and we need to make sure it's done properly. Do you understand what this means for his future?" I stared at her, disbelief and fury warring inside me. His future? We're talking about Lily's life. How can you even compare the two? But she wouldn't meet my eyes. My stepfather cleared his throat and added, "We all make sacrifices, Rachel. This is just one you'll have to bear." I left their house numb, clutching my purse like it might anchor me in the storm. For weeks, I begged. I sold jewelry, took out loans, worked myself until my body ached. Friends tried to help, but it was never enough. Each night, I watched Lily sleep, her chest rising shallowly, and wondered if time would betray me. And then the announcement came. My family had spent $300,000, more than double what I needed, on Adrian's wedding. A palace of flowers, a ballroom imported from Vienna, chandeliers dripping with crystals. My mother boasted about it at her church group, beaming with pride. I realized then that my daughter's life had been weighed against a dress, a band, a menu of extravagant wines, and found wanting. That night, lying beside Lily, I whispered into the dark, "Your life wasn't worth a gown, baby. Not even half of it." My tears soaked the pillow. For the first time, I felt something in me break, not just crack, but splinter into pieces that could never be put back the same way again. The wedding day arrived in a storm of photographs and fanfare. Despite everything, my name was on the guest list. Out of habit, or perhaps a lingering foolish hope, I went. Lily came with me, dressed in a simple blue dress she loved. I thought maybe, just maybe, the sight of her would soften them. When we arrived, the splendor was overwhelming. Golden chandeliers glittered above tables draped in silk, an orchestra played, and servers carried trays of champagne. Guests laughed, radiant in their finery. My stomach turned as I realized all of this had been bought at the cost of Lily's heartbeat. An usher led us to our seats, at the very back beside the restroom doors. Every flush and slam of the stall echoed louder than the music. My cheeks burned with humiliation. I wanted to stand up, to scream, but Lily clutched my hand, her eyes wide. Then Adrian took the stage. He looked sharp in his tailored suit, Vivian at his side like a glittering ornament. The crowd erupted in applause. He raised his glass, smiling, and then his eyes landed on me. "My family has always been my strength," he declared, his voice carrying easily across the room. "They've supported me, lifted me, and helped me rise. Except," he paused, his smirk widening, "except for those who chose failure. Some people drag us down, but tonight we celebrate leaving dead weight behind." The room exploded in laughter. Heads turned toward me, whispers slicing through the air. "That's his sister, isn't it? She looks so plain. Imagine being such a disappointment." I sat frozen, every muscle locked in place. My face burned, my chest ached, but I refused to let the tears fall where they could see. Beside me, Lily tugged on my sleeve, her small voice barely audible over the laughter. "Mommy, does that mean I'm not really family? Because I'm your daughter?" Her words were a knife twisting in the wound. I pulled her into my lap, wrapping my arms around her trembling body. I wanted to tell her no, that she was everything, that she was worth more than all of them combined. But the truth caught in my throat, heavy and bitter. As the orchestra swelled and the guests raised their glasses to toast Adrian's cruelty, I made a silent vow. This would not be the end of my story. They thought they had buried me under shame, but I would rise. And when I did, they would wish they had chosen differently. I wanted to leave. I wanted to take Lily's trembling hand and walk out of that glittering ballroom with its golden chandeliers and mocking stares, but my legs refused to move. The laughter from Adrian's cruel words still echoed against the marble walls, ricocheting inside me until my chest felt hollow. My own mother's approving smile at his insult cut deeper than the jeers of strangers. I lowered my gaze, wishing for invisibility, when a sudden silence rippled across the crowd. "Enough." The voice was calm, but carried the weight of command. I turned and saw him, Nathaniel Cross, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his presence radiating authority that silenced even the most arrogant guest. He walked through the crowd with unhurried steps, each one ringing with purpose. People instinctively stepped aside, whispers breaking like waves in his wake. He stopped beside me, and before I could understand what was happening, he placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "This woman," he said, his voice firm, resonant, "is the one person I owe my life to. Rachel Morgan is not a failure, not a disgrace. She is the reason I stand here today." The room froze. I felt the air thicken, as if the chandeliers themselves had paused to listen. My mouth went dry. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had never seen this man before, or so I thought. Adrian's smug grin faltered. Vivian's hand tightened on his arm, and my mother's face blanched, her eyes darting nervously between us. Murmurs erupted. Guests leaned toward one another, trying to piece together who Nathaniel was and why he defended me so publicly. I could hear fragments. "Isn't that? He's the Cross family heir. Doesn't his company?" Nathaniel's gaze swept over the crowd like a blade, silencing them again. He bent slightly toward me and whispered, so softly that only I could hear, "Stand tall, Rachel. They don't deserve to see you broken." My knees trembled, but his words planted a seed of strength where despair had rooted. For the first time that night, I lifted my head. All around, the whispers intensified. People now looked at me with a mix of curiosity and sudden respect, the same faces that had sneered minutes earlier. Adrian cleared his throat and forced a laugh, trying to regain control. "Nathaniel, you must be mistaken. Rachel is just my sister. She's always struggled, always dragging us down. Surely you don't mean to elevate her like this in front of our guests." Nathaniel turned slowly to Adrian, his smile polite but chilling. "I don't make mistakes when it comes to people who matter. Perhaps you should reconsider who's been dragging whom." The words landed like a slap, and for once, Adrian had no quick retort. Vivian's cheeks flushed crimson. Her father, seated near the front, suddenly shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I noticed it then, how their family looked at Nathaniel with something more than recognition. It was fear. Rachel Morgan, the invisible sister, the burden, was suddenly the center of attention, and not because of humiliation, but because of the man beside me. My heart raced. I didn't understand why he was doing this, but I couldn't deny the intoxicating power of watching my tormentor's smug confidence crumble. Nathaniel turned back to the crowd, his voice steady. "I came tonight to honor a union, but what I've witnessed is cruelty. If this is what family means to you, then perhaps it is time you learn the value of loyalty elsewhere." A hush fell so complete that even the string quartet at the far corner stopped playing. My mother's hands trembled on her lap, her face pale. Adrian's jaw tightened, his smile stretched too thin, while Vivian looked as if she'd swallowed poison. I bent down to scoop Lily into my arms. She pressed her cheek against my shoulder, her small body warm and trembling. "Mommy," she whispered, "why is everyone looking at us now?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and kissed her hair. "Because they finally see us," I murmured. Nathaniel offered me his arm. I hesitated only a second before taking it. Together, with Lily held close, we walked through the parted crowd. No one dared stop us. Some averted their eyes in shame, others in fear. The silence followed us all the way to the heavy doors, a silence that weighed heavier than laughter ever could. As we stepped into the cool night air, the ballroom doors closing behind us, I drew in a shuddering breath. My humiliation had been interrupted, transformed into something else entirely, but confusion gnawed at me as much as relief. Who was Nathaniel Cross? Why did he claim to owe me everything? I glanced sideways at him. His profile was sharp against the glow of the street lamps, his expression unreadable. He caught my gaze and gave a small, reassuring smile, as if he had been planning this moment all along. Inside, behind those closed doors, I could almost feel the panic spreading like wildfire. The whispers, the frantic questions, the weight of realization crashing down on Adrian and Vivian. I didn't know the full truth yet, but I sensed it. Power had shifted, and the balance would never be the same again. And this was only the beginning. The night after Adrian's wedding, I sat awake with Lily asleep beside me, her small hand curled against my arm. My mind replayed every detail, the sneers, the jeers, and then Nathaniel's sudden appearance like a storm breaking open the sky. Who was he really, and why had he defended me with such conviction? The next morning, I received a message asking me to meet him at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. I almost didn't go. I was too exhausted, too wary of yet another twist of humiliation. But something in his voice when he had told me to stand tall lingered. Against every instinct, I went. He was already waiting when I arrived, seated by the window with a cup of black coffee untouched before him. He stood as I approached, pulling out a chair for me as though I were someone of importance. The gesture unsettled me more than rudeness ever could. "I imagine you have questions," he said. I laughed, though it came out shaky. "That's one way of putting it. You storm into my brother's wedding, declare you owe me everything, and now everyone thinks I have some kind of secret life. Who are you, Nathaniel Cross?" His eyes softened, the sharpness in them giving way to something far more human. "I was 24 when I first met you. Do you remember a small apartment building on East Harbor Street, the one above the laundromat?" I frowned, the memory stirring faintly. "Yes, I used to live there for a few months while I was working 3 jobs. What about it?" "That building housed more than just you," he said quietly. I was there too, in the tiny room with a broken radiator. I had just started as an intern at a law firm, dirt poor, one step away from being thrown out. I was behind on rent, and the landlord was ready to kick me to the street. I searched his face, trying to connect the dots, when he continued, "One night, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was enough cash to cover my rent for 2 months. No name, no note, just salvation when I needed it most. Later, I found out it was you. You had overheard me begging the landlord, and instead of pity, you gave me dignity." My breath caught. I had no memory of him, not really. Just a vague recollection of a young man with hollow eyes, desperate but proud. I had left that envelope without thinking, certain I would never see him again. To me, it had been a small kindness, barely worth remembering. To him, it had been life itself. "I built everything I have on those 2 months," Nathaniel said, leaning forward. "I worked, I clawed my way up, and eventually I built Cross Enterprises. But I never forgot. I kept track of you from a distance. I saw the sacrifices you made, the way your family bled you dry. I told myself one day I would repay what I owed." My eyes blurred. I pressed a hand to my mouth, overwhelmed. "I couldn't save Lily with my own family," I whispered, voice breaking. "But somehow, I saved you?" Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. Nathaniel's hand brushed mine gently, a quiet assurance. Outside the cafe, the world moved on as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. Word of what had happened at the wedding spread like wildfire. By the end of the week, whispers reached even my classroom, colleagues glancing at me with curiosity and something that felt uncomfortably like awe. The story twisted with each retelling. Rachel Morgan, the sister scorned, defended by a titan of industry. Rachel Morgan, the invisible daughter, suddenly visible in the harshest light. For the Morgan family, the consequences were immediate. Vivian's father, whose construction empire relied heavily on contracts with Cross Enterprises, began making frantic calls. Meetings were scheduled, desperate pleas made. None of it mattered. The threat was clear. Nathaniel's goodwill was worth more than any deal, and they had spat in the face of the woman who held it. I tried to shut it out, to focus on Lily, but the past has a way of chasing you down. One evening, just as I was tucking Lily into bed, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Adrian standing there, his face pale, his expensive suit wrinkled, eyes wild with fear. "Rachel," he said, his voice cracking, "please, you have to help me. Vivian's family, her father is furious. The deals are collapsing. If Nathaniel pulls everything, we'll be ruined." I stared at him, memories flooding back. The countless times I had begged my family for help. The nights I had knelt before my mother, pleading for Lily's life. He was trembling now, just as I had trembled, desperation dripping from every word. "Do you remember?" I asked softly. "The night I begged for Lily? The night I cried until my voice broke and you turned away?" Adrian swallowed hard. "Ah, that was different. This is business. This is survival." "No," I said, my voice steady, cold with truth. "It's the same. I begged, and you chose chandeliers over her heartbeat. Now you beg, and I choose silence." His eyes widened, horror and disbelief twisting his features. For the first time in his charmed life, Adrian Morgan was powerless, and he knew it. I closed the door gently, leaving him on the porch, his fists clenched, his cries muffled through the wood. Inside, Lily slept soundly, unaware of the storm outside. I sat beside her, brushing her hair back, and whispered, "They made me invisible." But not anymore. The collapse began quietly, like a crack in glass spreading too fast to stop. Within days of our confrontation, Nathaniel pulled every contract Cross Enterprises had with Vivian's father. Projects worth millions were frozen, shipments halted, and investors withdrew like birds fleeing a burning forest. The news made headlines. Clark Holdings faces unprecedented financial crisis. Vivian's father raged, pounding his fists against polished boardroom tables, but the damage was irreversible. Without Nathaniel's trust, doors that had always been wide open slammed shut. In whispers and hushed conversations, his name turned from one of influence to one of ruin. Adrian was caught in the spiral. He had been hired into one of Clark Holdings' subsidiaries, his job secured more by his last name than his competence. When the company began downsizing, he was among the first to be dismissed. Vivian's family, once eager to display him as a golden prize, now regarded him as a stain on their reputation. Vivian herself withdrew, her affection souring into contempt. I saw her once, in a cafe, her diamond ring conspicuously absent. The world that had once embraced Adrian now spit him out. The invitations stopped coming, his so-called friends vanished, and even the neighbors who once envied his wealth whispered as he passed. He went from prince to pariah in the span of weeks, and though part of me pitied him, a deeper part remembered every cruel word, every time he looked down on Lily and me, and I felt no desire to reach out. But this was not the end. Not yet. I had one more card to play, one that would carve the truth into stone so no one could forget it. When the Morgan family home, my childhood home, was put on the market in a desperate attempt to cover debts, I watched in silence. The house sold for far less than it was worth, a fire sale that stripped them of pride along with security. I didn't buy it. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I waited until the sale closed, and then, with Nathaniel's support, I announced the creation of the Lily Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to funding surgeries for children with rare heart conditions. At the launch event, held in the very community center where my mother once volunteered for appearances' sake, I stood at the podium with Lily by my side. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, and behind me hung a banner with my daughter's smiling face. The seed money for the foundation? It came from the proceeds of the Morgan home, donated anonymously but revealed that night for the world to see. My family once told me, I said into the microphone, that $120,000 was too much to spend on saving my daughter's life. Tonight, we use far more than that to save countless children. Out of cruelty, we've built compassion. Out of betrayal, we've created hope. The applause thundered, not just polite claps, but the kind that carries conviction. In that moment, I felt a weight lift from me, the years of invisibility burning away under the light of vindication. But not everyone applauded. At the back of the hall, my mother stood hunched, her once proud figure diminished. When the crowd dispersed, she approached, her eyes wet, her voice trembling. "Rachel," she whispered, "I was wrong. I was blind. Please, forgive me. I've lost everything, but I can't lose you too." I looked at her, at the woman who had birthed me yet abandoned me when I needed her most. The silence stretched, and for a moment I almost wished I could give her what she asked for. But then I remembered kneeling on her kitchen floor, begging for Lily's life, and the way she turned away without a flicker of mercy. "You're not asking because you lost me," I said softly but firmly. "You're asking because you lost your house, your pride, your status. You never mourned me or Lily. You mourn what money can't buy back." Her face crumpled, her mouth opening as if to protest, but no words came. She turned and walked away, shoulders bowed under the weight of a truth she could no longer deny. Later that night, I sat in the hospital room with Lily as she recovered from a checkup. Machines beeped softly, casting their steady rhythm over the sterile air. She slept peacefully, her hair spread across the pillow like a halo. I stroked her forehead, my heart aching with a mixture of gratitude and grief. I thought of the past years, of the sacrifices, the betrayals, the endless humiliations, and I thought of how close I had come to breaking. The world outside saw a woman who had won, who had taken revenge and turned pain into power. But sitting there, in the quiet glow of the monitors, I was just a mother holding on to the only thing that had ever truly mattered. The reckoning had come. Yes, Adrian had fallen, my mother had crumbled, and the family that once dismissed me as invisible now bore scars they could not hide. But I knew, deep in my chest, that the story wasn't over. There was still one final lesson left to deliver, and when it came, it would be the strike they never recovered from. Seasons passed, and with them, the sharp edges of my pain began to dull. The woman I once was, the daughter who bent her back until it broke, the sister who bled herself dry for scraps of approval, no longer existed. In her place stood someone new. I wasn't hardened into stone, as I once feared. I had learned to bend without breaking, to carry scars without letting them own me. My strength was not in coldness, but in my ability to still feel deeply, to still love fiercely. Lily's health improved steadily. The surgery, once a distant hope, had given her a chance to run across fields, laugh with friends, and sleep without the shadow of pain haunting her dreams. I watched her twirl in the park one afternoon, her laughter rising like bells, and I felt my heart swell with a happiness I hadn't dared believe in. She was my miracle, and she deserved a mother who could finally breathe without chains around her chest. The Lily Foundation grew beyond anything I could have imagined. Parents who had once stared at hospital bills in despair now held their children close, alive because of the work we were doing. Each success story was a balm to the wounds my family had carved into me. For every child saved, I felt another layer of the past peel away, leaving me lighter. People no longer looked at me with pity or dismissal. They looked with respect, sometimes even awe. And through it all, Nathaniel stayed. He never demanded, never pushed. He was simply there, at board meetings, at hospital check-ins, at quiet dinners where Lily fell asleep between us, her head on my shoulder. Slowly, the walls I had built began to soften. One night, as we walked home from a fundraising gala, he slipped his hand into mine. I didn't pull away. His warmth was steady, grounding, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope for love. Not the conditional, transactional kind I had grown up with, but something rooted in respect and truth. Yet, even as my world bloomed, the shadows of my family lingered. I heard whispers of Adrian's decline. Vivian had left him not long after the collapse, her engagement ring pawned off to fund her own escape. Adrian drifted from job to job, his once proud shoulders slumped under the weight of failure. I saw him once across the street, his suit frayed, his hair unkempt. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and couldn't bear to meet my eyes. My mother, too, faced her reckoning. Stripped of her home and her illusions, she lived alone in a cramped apartment, the walls bare, the silence echoing. Neighbors said she rarely left. Her pride curdled into bitterness. She had lost not only her wealth, but the daughter she had dismissed, the granddaughter she had denied, the son whose arrogance had dragged them all down. In the end, she was left with only her own reflection, and the knowledge that she had chosen chandeliers over heartbeats. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I should forgive her. The thought flickered, tender but fleeting. Forgiveness, I realized, is not something owed. It is a gift, and she had never earned it. My peace did not depend on her contrition. It depended on me letting go of the chains she had wrapped around me for so long. One evening, standing on the balcony of my modest but warm home, I watched Lily sleep inside and Nathaniel sorting through papers at the table. The glow of the lamp haloed him, and I felt a profound sense of arrival. I had not just survived. I had built something better. My past no longer defined me. My future was mine to claim. As for my family, they still existed, but in the shadows. Their lives had shrunk into the darkness of greed and regret, while mine stretched forward into light. They chose ambition over compassion, pride over love, and they paid the price that choices like that always demand. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, betrayal can break a heart, but it can also forge a fire strong enough to make the betrayer kneel. I was no longer the invisible daughter, no longer the sister sacrificed. I was Rachel Morgan, mother, survivor, and woman reborn, and this was only the beginning.